잘못했네요.
Hello everybody. Thank you for joining us today to participate in this webcast powered by Yole Développement and dedicated to our new product, Power Integrated Circuits Quarterly Update. My name is David Jordan and I am Global Sales Support and Coordinator for Yole Développement. Before we get started with the webcast, I would like to give you some information regarding logistics. So you have the possibility during all the webcasts to submit questions. In order to do so, you have to use the box at the bottom of the screen labeled Ask a Question. We will answer as many questions today as permits, and for the remaining question, we will follow up with you through email. Concerning the presentation material, please note that it is already available and downloadable from this platform in the resources section. You will also receive an email within 24 hours after the webcast with a link to access the recorded session. So Yole Développement will now introduce its new product, Power IC Quarterly Update. But first, let's start with an overview of the product introduced by Pierrick Kegel, Business Unit Manager in Power Electronics and Compound Semiconductor at Yole Développement. Pierrick, please.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to make this presentation about the quarterly updates related to Power ICs. First of all, we wanted to provide you and explain what is those quarterly updates developed and produced by Yole Développement. So a quarterly update is a brand new series of products launched by Yole Développement this year in 2017 to increase the frequency of market analysis and help customers to navigate through the turbulences of the Power IC market. So the first quarterly update that we have produced is related to the IC, the Power ICs, but you will see in the coming months that we will extend those type of products toward other type of products. So why is Yole doing such type of products? So Yole chooses to provide the quarterly updates, first of all, to provide a timely updates and reliable data set to screen and monitor the Power IC market. To typical once a year update was not the right frequency to some customers' needs. So we had regularly questions regarding how a typical product was evolving during the year long. So we wanted to be more close to those customer needs and to be able to support them all over the year with multiple and several quarterly updates. So the quarterly updates focus on main aspects. We have historic data on the power semiconductors ICs. We have forecast by application market. And once a year, we provide in-depth analysis of the market shares of the players involved in this market. Then who should be interested in those type of quarterly updates? Obviously, today's customers are person involved as product managers. We have company executives who wants to monitor the market, the semiconductor suppliers, semiconductors manufacturing partners that involved in the development, deployment, sales, and service of manufacturing Power ICs can use the frequently update tool to gain understanding of the market. How many times and when are we published the quarterly updates? So you may have probably seen that with these brand new products, but we are releasing approximately 60 days after the closing of the quarter, shortly after large analog and power semiconductors companies releases their quarterly earning and forward-looking statements. In a single calendar year, you will have 4 quarterly updates containing the quarterly and annual forecasts will be released. And during the Q1 report of each calendar year, you will have, as I mentioned earlier, a market share data gathering through primary and secondary researches will be included. How will customers benefit? So definitely we are convinced that the customers will gain an up-to-date understanding of the current Power IC growth rate on the quarterly basis. That will enable timely strategy planning and adjustment to the current and forecasted market conditions according to Yole's assessment. And that those products will provide an understanding of the market shares and competitive landscape of key players in the Power IC market. So basically, every quarter we will be producing the quarterly updates. In each case, we will deliver an Excel spreadsheet, and we will be able to present those Excel spreadsheets just afterwards. We will produce and deliver as well executive summary for the quarterly updates, and we will deliver a third document, which will be an Excel spreadsheet base for the market shares. And persons will taking the Q2 report will have access as well, obviously, of the market shares. Yearly updates.
All right. Thank you very much, Pierrick, for this interesting overview of the product. Once again, do not hesitate to use the Q&A button to ask some questions during the webcast. We'll try to answer them at the end of this webcast. Now, Jonathan Lyo, which is Senior Analyst, and Business Development Manager in Power Electronics at Yole, will present in more detail the Power IC quarterly update and its content. Jonathan, it's your turn.
Oh, thank you, David. Thank you, everybody, for attending this webcast. So I'm going to go over the objective and the key elements inside the quarterly update. As far as our objective goes, like Pierrick has mentioned, we allow you access Power IC market. And within that market, we cover the following components in switching regulators, LDO regulators, battery management ICs, multi-channel battery management IC, and all the other Power ASICs that we see that is relevant to the Power IC market. Because this is updated on a quarterly basis, we can add or remove or tweak our coverage of these components on a quarterly basis and more frequent as the market condition changes. So the second part is for you to help understand the market dynamic for Power IC applications, and that comes from the component standpoint as well as from the application standpoint. So overall, it covers 40 end markets based on the applications and over 15 Power IC components. And as a customer or subscriber to this report, and you have an overview of the competitive landscape of the Power IC market, as well as following the market trends and the growth drivers. And on the next page, we have some of the key features. The first most important one is this is a quarterly update. So you have a new report once every quarter based on the latest information and press releases, earning releases, and forward-looking statements from some of the largest analog and Power IC companies. And we provide all the forecasts in revenue terms as well as in unit terms. And on the application and market level, we break it down into 5 major key markets: automotive, consumer, computing, communication, and industrial market. So the breakdown also include all different type of ICs, as I mentioned before. In each of these markets, you have a breakdown of the 15 different types of ICs that we cover. And finally, we have the end market analysis with component level detail in both revenue and units. And once a year, you will also have the market share information. And today, I'm going to demo for you the executive summary, cover the type of information that is covered in the executive summary, as well as giving you a deeper look at the Excel database and see what kind of information you get from there. So for the detailed components and market, I'll give you a moment to look over this major application market as well as their sub-markets. So in automotive, we have over around 6 markets. Communication is roughly about 10. computing have 8 different end markets, and in consumer, we had over 12. And finally, industrial, we have roughly about 8 end markets. And the definitions and the type of devices that's covered in each of this market can be found in the actual executive summary definition section. Furthermore, if you have any questions, feel free to email us. And if there's a particular information, a particular application segment that you're interested in, feel free to email us and we have any questions. And on the next slide, we have the power ICs and the type of component that we cover. For linear regulator, we had the traditional linear regulator have a dropout voltage greater than 0.7 volts. And we also had the LDO regulators, that's basically 0.7 volts or lower. In the switching regulator arena, we have 4 types of devices in there. AC to DC switching regulator, DC to DC, isolated switching controller, and non-isolated switching controllers. In voltage reference, that's basically just single type of IC. For supervisor sequencer switches, we separate them into the 3, as obviously stated in the name. And for battery management IC, we primarily track the battery charging ICs, and the management of the battery function typically is built in there already. And in the other power management IC, we have 7 different kind of devices, and I'll give you a moment to look them over. And once again, if you have any question regarding the definition of what type of devices classify into each one of the subcomponents, feel free to give us an email. So next, I'll give you a demonstration of the executive summary.
Currently, in Chandler, it's 61 degrees with intermittent and clouds. You can expect more of the
Alexa, stop.
day with a high of 82
Sorry about that.
and a low of 58
The global power IC market in the year 2016 was estimated to be almost $16 billion US. And in this market, it changes very quickly from a quarter-to-quarter basis, primarily depending on some of the large applications. Typically, in the communication area, smartphone is one of the area, depending on growth and decline of devices that are being shipped that quarter. You end up having a lot of up and downs depending on device numbers. And as a result, what we do is, first of all, we provide an annual forecast. They give you the forecast from the year 2017 all the way out to 2022. So roughly 5 years and 6 years, depends on which quarter you're in, for the annual revenue number. And besides that, we also provide a quarterly forecast, which is important for the planning and then especially on a short-term basis to understand how each quarter that we perceive is going to impact the power IC market. And this quarterly forecast is typically provided for the current year and the 4 quarters for the next year. So a very short-term short-term focus slide. And for the macro basis, we also provide a device breakdown by end market, how the 5 major end markets are going to impact the power IC. So if you were a customer of Yole, you know we are very emphasizing on the industrial as well as automotive market. We see tremendous growth potential from those 2 end markets. And we'll give you a percentage of how the entire landscape is going to change between the year 2016 and the year 2020. And besides the end market on an application level, we also provide a component level. So for the year 2016, we have roughly multi-channel PMICs, taking up almost 30% of the $15.61 billion market. And DC to DC switching regulator, that's roughly about 20%. So that kind of information will provide you on a quarterly basis as we see revenue going up and down. And finally, based on how the market has changed and the market condition changes, we provide you a overall CAGR as well as revenue number based on the 5 major end markets with an in-depth look into each of these markets. So here I have an example for the automotive market. So we provide the 6 sub-markets that's impacting the automotive growth, from body and convenience, chassis and safety ADAS, congestion safety, infotainment, as well as other automotive markets. We give you a in-depth look into what are the current events and or the current consumer behaviors that will change our forecast. For example, one of the things that is going to impact some of the power IC, especially in the higher medium power space, is the release of electric cars. So we keep track of all the electric car releases or announcements, as well as the production data, to give you an in-depth look in how we think those events are going to change the market outlook. Similarly, as you well know, that the iPhone was just released, and that's tremendous value and shipment numbers into the multi-channel PMIC market. So we keep track of the shipment for iPhone 8, iPhone X, as well as their competitors such as the Samsung Galaxy, and how the consumers are adapting or responding to those kind of devices. And we'll provide you a quarterly update on how those devices are changing our forecast, both in the short term and long term spec. And furthermore, we give you both in the unit terms and revenue numbers, so you can also apply your internal analysis and due diligence to derive to the conclusion that you want. So this is a very data-centric report, and what I'm going to show you next is the Excel demonstration on how you can get to those numbers yourself once you become a customer. And here, lastly, is the power integrated circuit and some of the definition slides. And as I mentioned before, you can look at it from both the component standpoint and application market standpoint. And right now, we'll give you a demonstration of the Power IC quarterly update. So for the purpose of this demonstration, we are using the version Power IC quarterly update Q2 2017. And we're going to go over the Excel files first. So as soon as you open the Excel file, you can see there's an index tab, which is the place that we recommend everyone to start their work with. From the index tab, you can see there's 6 dynamic tables and 6 static tables and 6 dynamic tables. In the static tables, the first 2 tables cover the annual revenue forecast by end model, as well as the growth rate forecast by end model. And this is for the markets such as automotive, consumer, communication, computing, and industrial markets. And table 221 and 2-2, those are the quarterly revenue forecast and the growth rate forecast by end market. And lastly, we had the annual revenue forecast by component, as well as annual growth rate forecast by component. And I'll go over what kind of component covered in the next screenshot. All the 6 static tables are derivative from the dynamic pivot tables. In other words, you can reproduce the static tables by playing around with the pivot tables. Namely, pivot table 1 is the annual unit shipments, pivot table 2 is the annual revenue forecast, and the last pivot table is the annual revenue forecast by component. So I'll go over each of these tables with you. So if you take a look at the static table, the first table 1-1 is the annual revenue forecast by the end market. And the 5 major end markets Yole defined are automotive, communications, computing, consumer, and industrial. And we'll provide an overall total revenue for each of the sectors. For example, for the year 2015 and 2016 for automotive, we have $1.026 billion and $1.109 billion respectively. And the forecast is extended all the way from 2017 out to 2022. And lastly, the CAGR is provided as the last column for each of these end markets. And similarly, we had a growth rate from the year 2016 to 2022, as well as the total growth rate for the entire Power IC sector. And a graph is also provided that gives you the growth rate as well as the market size to give you a graphical representation of the market size. As you can clearly see in the power market space, the largest size segment is the communication market. However, the fastest growth rate comes from the automotive market. And on the next table, we have the Power IC by the quarter. For the quarterly forecast, we're typically trying to cover 8
For the
quarters.
quarterly forecast, we're typically trying to cover 8 quarters. So from Q1 2017 all the way to Q4 2018. And this will not change for the entire year. For example, right now we're in Q3 2017. The quarterly forecast will extend out to Q4 2018. However, as we enter Q4 2017, we'll extend the quarterly forecast one additional year to Q4 2019. So the quarterly revenue for these markets are provided in a single cell. And very similarly, you can see the quarterly growth rate from each of these end markets from Q1 2017 to Q4 2018. And the CAGR is not provided unlike the annual forecast number. And very similar to the annual forecast number, we have the quarterly forecast number in here. And once again, you can observe the communication market being one of the largest markets with the highest revenue. However, in terms of growth rate, each quarter is somewhat different. This is reflected due to the seasonality for many of the end market components, especially when it comes to computing and consumer. The behavior of consumers are different when they come to purchasing these kind of goods. Q3 is typically when manufacturers start building consumer electronics and computing in anticipation of the holiday sales. And this kind of behavior is not observed or less observed in the automotive and industrial sector. And lastly, on the static table, we have Power IC by type. So here are the components that Yole covers on the left hand of table 3.1. AC to AC power switching regulators, battery management ICs, DC to DC switching regulators, isolated switching controllers, LDO regulators, monolithic power stage. Those are the power stage including a driver and a power switch on a single chip, and multi-channel power ICs, multi-chip power stage, and that is defined as power stage having the driver and power switch in two different chips on the same package. Non-isolated switching controller, PFC controller, supervisor sequencing controller, traditional linear regulator, and lastly, voltage references. And the respective revenue figure is provided by the year. So for example, DC to DC switching regulator had $2.8 billion in 2016, and our forecast is for it to grow to over $3 billion, more specifically $3.27 billion by the year 2022, with a CAGR of 2.8%. And this revenue number is provided for each of the components that we cover, as well as a grand total which matches the end market sizing. And on table 3.2, where similarly we'll have the growth rate forecast by each of these components. And the CAGR is also provided for them. And a graphical representation of the component is provided here. As you can see, the multi-channel PMIC is one of the largest by revenue in all the power ICs. So now we take a look at the static tables, and we can see how we can reproduce the data that you want on the dynamic table. So the first pivot table is by units. So everything in here is by thousands of units. And we have multiple subdevices that we have mentioned before that you can reproduce depending on your business needs and what you need to see. So in here, you can pick the components either just by themselves or you can select multiple items. The table is built using a bottom-up and a top-down methodology where every single component in each of the application segments is added up at the end to provide the overall market size and health of the industry. So for AC to DC switching regulators, for example, if you pick just a single component, it will give you the AC to DC switching regulators by segment and by applications. In automotive, because most likely the AC to DC switching regulators are not present, we do not have any revenue figure for them. However, when you move on to communications, for example, low-tier consumer and SOHO routers, smart home, office routers, you have a unit number associated with that market segment. And then we do that for all of the 40 plus end markets that we are covering in the power IC market. As you can see, we also have a segment or end market sum for that particular space. Here you have industrial market, consumer market, computing market, and communication market. They all have a unit number associated with it. And you can also copy and paste any of these numbers into a separate Excel sheet, depending on your business needs. But by doing this, we allow you to examine each individual component, as well as choosing several different components together. We'll see how we can do that. So similarly, on the subdevice selection box, you can click on the select multiple items. So if we're just interested in LDO regulator and linear regulators, we can pick two components, one being the LDO regulator component, the other the traditional linear regulator component. After you click OK, the table is automatically updated, reflecting the units for each of these end markets. And we can see this time we have data for all the segments across multiple years, forecast from 2017 all the way out to 2022. And that's how you get to the unit shipment forecast. So now let's turn our attention to the revenue forecast, which is very similar to the pivot table unit forecast. First of all, you can pick just a single individual component or multiple components depending on your interest and your business needs. Using a single component, we use the same example from AC/DC switching regulators. In here, the revenue numbers provided in thousands of US dollars. So here, the number gives us a $10 million market for the AC to DC switching regulators for communication battery charger for the year 2015. And similarly, you have the same forecast from 2017 all the way out to 2022. And if you're interested in multiple components, you can pick that from the selector box. We use the same example as we did before on LDO regulators and traditional linear regulators. As soon as pick OK, the revenue number is updated and refreshed. So here we can see body and convenience for the year 2015. We have linear regulator revenue at roughly $38 million. You can do that for each of the individual components. If you need to see more, you can also double click on any of the cells and it'll give you the breakdown in a new sheet using Excel. Very powerful pivot table drill down tool. And here we can see how much linear regulator we have and how much traditional regulators we have. So if you go back to the revenue number, you can do that for any of the cells that you have just by double clicking on them. And we believe this is an incredibly powerful tool for business decision makers to look at the market, examine the forecast, to derive to the sound business decisions they need to make in picking which market to invest and which device to invest. So finally, we had a pivot table by component. And here is very similar, except all the components are grouped together into a single revenue figure. For example, here we have AC to DC switching regulators of a market size of $438 million. And that is basically the entire segment application markets combined. In other words, everything that utilizes AC to DC switching regulators in the application, whether it's for automotive, computing, consumer, communication, or industrial market, is gathered together into this single number for year 2015. So if you need to have more detail, you can also double click on this and it will expand into the entire market for you. And in here you can sort by the market, by A to Z, or you can sort by the infotainment. So if you take a look at automotive, like we mentioned before, very little or none AC to DC switching regulators are involved. But it also present you with the entire segment revenue for communications, for computing, consumer, industrial market. And by doing this drill down too, and you can get to your business decisions earlier and easier. And any of these cells in here are double clickable, and you can look at the revenue distribution based on the end market and by the components. And lastly, you can calculate the growth rate based on the total revenue for a particular component, or you can see the overall power IC market growth and how healthy it is going from 2016 to 2022. And on the bottom, we have a pie chart representing the market sizing for all the power IC by component type. And here, as you can observe, that 29% of all power IC for multi-channel PMICs is being utilized very widely in smartphones as well as laptop and tablets. And the second largest market, and you have DC-to-DC switching regulator. And you can see how our distribution changes over time by copying some of the data into a separate Excel sheet and do your own internal analysis. And with that being said, you can go back to the index file and examine any of the table for yourself, as well as play around with it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Yole, and we'll be glad to go over a WebEx section with you and provide you additional insights if needed. Thank you.
Okay, nice demo, Jonathan. Thank you very much. Now let's take a look at the question asked on the platform. And the first question is about the methodology used by Yole to collect this data and to check the validity. Can you help us, Jonathan?
Yes. So, of course. So the data is basically a combination of both primary and secondary research results. From the primary research results standpoint, you see Yole analysts attend every single major trade show globally, and that's where we get the most of our first-hand information regarding new product introductions and technology development. And additionally, we have an extensive contact and network, which allows us to interview people that are in the industry rather regularly and provide us insight and update on what the market has changed. That combined with the secondary research, primarily earnings from company financial releases, forward-looking statements. We also combine other data such as sales data from WSTS, device teardowns, unit shipment announcement by companies. And with all those combined, we crafted this data set to provide to our customers with the latest and most up-to-date information.
Okay, second question is asked about this product. So it's a really new product for Yole Développement. It contains data and a few analysis. Is it the new strategy from Yole?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yole has been covering the entire power semiconductor industry for a very long time. However, besides power, we also cover other areas such as photonics, automotive, medical LED, battery management, and many others. And this coverage is continuing to expand. What we are trying to do here is aim to utilize all the internal expertise and the resources and market analytic capability and knowledge available within Yole to create a consolidated and usable product for our customers. Power management IC is one of the first quarterly update Yole created this year. However, if the product is proven to be successful, you can expect more similar type of products from other areas of coverage that I mentioned before.
Okay, just the last question. Concerning this quarterly update, can we buy only one database?
Yes, absolutely you can. If you take one database, the price is same as a single report, but you also get access to the Q1 market share data from the previous, basically calendar year. If your business needs does not require you to have a quarterly understanding of the market and how it's changing. However, if your business is impactful enough that you do need the quarterly insight, you can take the entire full report or what we call annual subscription
And the price for that, it's a AS3 pricing. So in another word, you're getting full reports for the entire year, but the price is same as the AS3. So for your particular account and what your company's current subscription levels are, I recommend talking to your account manager, and they can help you provide pricing and go from there. Thank you.
Okay, great. So the webcast is now ending. Let me remember you that within the next 24 hours, you will receive an email that will include the link to the recorded session. Feel free to share the presentation among your colleagues, and you can also find more data and analysis on our imicronews.com website, especially in the report section. Thank you for joining us today. Do not hesitate to contact us if you have additional questions. You can find some information on our last slide of presentation. Have a good day. Thank you very much. Bye.